Let's start this lesson on forcible entry, particularly concerning truck company operations, by dealing with some size-up factors that you need to consider. Forcible entry has many rules. Probably the most important is that you get out in your area and deal with a pre-fire plan. Look at the types of locks, the type of doors, look at some of the problem access areas and the areas inside the building that you would need to get to if you had an emergency. Learning all the different locks would be too much. There's so many different kinds on the market, and you cannot tell by looking at the door necessarily which lock it is. Some of the rules that we're going to consider so that you can do your performance checklist will be simple things like trying the door before you force it. It's a simple rule, but many times forgotten. How about feeling the door for heat? Having a tack crew ready before you enter, before you actually force the door. We need to consider which way the door swings, inward or outward. We need to consider that, do we want to use a conventional force, meaning pry bars, etc., or do we want to use a more technical approach, as in power saws, torches, a hydraulic rescue tool, whatever. Whichever way you choose to do it during your size, if you need to consider, you have to be successful within 5 minutes per door. And the only way that that's going to work into the incident command system is if you communicate that to the rest of the teams. If you have not been successful, they need to know that, because the plan of attack will change. So let's look a little bit at some of the advanced tools and then move towards our more conventional tools. Truck companies generally start with several power tools, one of which is a circular saw. There's several different types on the market. Just remember to have a metal blade in the saw at all times, because that's your most active job. You can cut things with bolt cutters. Remember that shackles bolts nowadays are hardened, so we're not going to open those well. Or you could go to the truly advanced tools, which would be the torches. This is an exothermic torch called slice air or arc air. It has its own requirements and its own safety procedures. It's important that you look at those. Or the oxyacetylene torch, not used so often anymore. Truck companies will have these at their disposal. Remember that your eye protection will be more important for these type of tools because of the type of debris flying, and most importantly, the shields that we have many times are not adequate. If you have a BA on, that may be your best protection, that face piece. Moving towards more intermediate tools, consider that we have many different types of prying tools. Hooks, bars, ram bars that move, regular pry bars. And more conventional tools, of course, the Halligan, the flathead axe, the firefighter's axe, and some of the smaller tools that are now becoming popular in the truck companies through the lock entries. We're going to deal with each of these tools later on in the lesson. Consider that these are brute force, and they are not going to be very nice to the door. You're going to have to destroy a piece of the door to use these tools, and we may not want to do that in some instances. Let's take a look at some of the locks that we're most concerned with. There's a lot of different locks on the market. Most of them can be categorized in a couple areas: rim or mortise, or a combination of the two. Now, a rim lock is fairly simple. It can be surface mounted, as in this lock. Any Homer can add to that. It could be as simple as a bolt. Again, surface mounted to the inside or outside of the door, depending on which. Some may have a padlock, some may not. These sometimes can be pushed through, but you will not see these from the outside of the door. More of a combination. You take a mortise lock, which has a lock cylinder and maybe some inside mechanism. Several different ways can be used to open these locks, which we'll detail a little bit later. Or you have more of a conventional residential lock, which is a passage door lock with some type of a tubular bolt. One type being this sliding bolt here with a separate lock edge on it, or what's commonly seen as a deadbolt, which is a tubular bolt. It's mounted in the mortise of the door as such, but it may stick out 1 to 2 inches depending on the brand and the type of security that people want to have. All of these generally are mounted in wooden doors. Now, with the advent of security, we have a little more expensive mortise locks, and they become in aluminum doors, usually with glass. And they're again a bolt. However, these are a pivoting bolt. And there's really only a couple ways that we can enter these. We'll come back to these later on into the lesson. Let's look at the rest of our size up. Now, once you've identified the lock in your pre-fire plan, let's deal with what we have to look at on the door to even affect the tool use. We have a couple doors. Dan will show us the correct way to address a door. Remember, in size up, you need to bring the tools with you, so when you're there at site, you can use your tools to open the door. You can't leave them on the unit. He has his light and his hand tools. Generally, for an inward swinging door, we're going to look for a door stop. It can be wood or it can be rabbited into the jamb itself. You're going to feel the door for your heat, and you're going to move across and try to find the doorknob itself. It may have one or two key areas. One could be a cylinder, a deadbolt type of cylinder. One could be the knob itself that has a key in it. Either way, try the knob first. If it opens and the door swings inward, you've effected entry and you haven't wasted any time on the deadbolt. Another type of door, most common of course, would be the outward swinging door. Again, the same applies. You touch the door for heat, you slide across looking for knobs or deadbolts, and the key to this one would be, are the hinges available to you? Can you remove the hinge? Can you feel the hinge on the opposite side of the door? Try the knob, open it, the door may open for you without a lot of force. Determining the swing of the door is only one part of the size up. Another very important part of the size up is to identify what type of lock it is so you can choose the right tool to do the job. For instance, on an aluminum door with glass, it still has a bolt. This is an advanced method. We'd bring in a circular saw. Generally, trucks carry these, remember? The only way to effectively do this without damaging the glass would be to cut the bolt completely through and then swing the door in or out. One of the most advanced locks we have on the market today is the hotel type of locks. Again, we'd have to take the power saw to reach through the hasp or through the door edge and cut through this bolt. This door or this type of lock is almost impossible to force conventionally. It has a lot of cylinders, it has an interlocking mechanism. The only safest way on many rooms would be to cut through the bolt. Okay. Now, a more intermediate type of lock, more common now on most businesses and many homeowner doors even, especially those that are wood-style doors, would be a mortise lock. Remember, the mortise lock is mounted in the edge of the door as such. On this particular mortise lock, we have a cylinder we're going to have to remove. We'd use one of the prying tools. It's a very simple operation. Take a prying tool, place it upon the lock itself, which would cause it to pop out, and then working through that opening, we have to operate the mechanism. Now, through the lock only means that we're going to operate the mechanism. It affects all different kinds of locks. By reaching through there, you would see the bolt move on this particular application. Or on a little bit older type of mortise lock, again, reaching through the lock hole, we would operate the mechanism and in fact move the bolt. All mortise locks have a movable bolt. This same type of through the lock can be used on any type of a building where we don't want to necessarily damage the expensive door or the expensive jamb, and if we have the time to do this within the 5 minutes, we could use this same technique on a simple tumbler or a simple deadbolt. Pop the face of the deadbolt off, which we'll show you in an additional lesson here in a little while. We'll pop off one side of this lock mechanism, reach through that with one of the many pieces of the key tool here, and move the bolt or move the mechanism on the inside. We're going to take a break now. When we come back, we'll do the hands-on showing which tools to use on which one of the doors, and we'll force some doors in or out. In this lesson, we're going to concentrate on how to open inward or outward swinging doors using the tools that we showed earlier and the correct way to use these tools. We have several types of locks to be concerned with first. We need to identify the lock and then choose the appropriate tool. This tool is a mini tool or an A tool. It's a small pry bar carried by officers, has an A shape there so that we can force this over the top of smaller locks. As an example, remember that we have mortise type of locks where we are going to spread the door and the frame apart so that the lock or the bolt can pass the striker, whether it is a tumbler type or a deadbolt. The same effect. We're going to pry these two spaces open. Standard wood door versus the mortise. To pry that wood, we may use the end of this tool, or we may use the end of the Halligan, which we will show in a minute. For this particular mortise type of lock, remember we have to remove the cylinder. The K tool, we'll show you, fits directly over the top of this cylinder, removes the cylinder, and you can reach on the inside with the key tool and operate the mechanism. All of these tools work together. Remember, you need to use more than one tool to affect the job. Now let's go to a door. This is an inward swinging door. Remember the hinges now, you cannot see. They're on our right, doorknob on the left. The two firefighters come to the door with their Halligan and their flathead axe. The first effort is going to be to force the door past its jamb without actually removing any of the hardware. And to do this, you can see that we're going to start with the fork end in this particular evolution. The fork end is placed in the crack between the door and the jamb. Now this is a metal jamb, so the door is going to give way because it's wood. And we strike the Halligan several times, forcing the Halligan around the edge of the jamb and then pushing the door away from us. And we've separated the jamb from the door. Now an alternate method for this particular tool is to take the adze end, which is a flattened section of the tool, and very sharp. We can actually force that in the same position, maybe below the lock, and strike it using the axe again. A couple blows, and it forces fairly easy. Now, in this instance, we see right away one of the problems we're dealing with. We had two different locks trying to hold the door. Let's take a second look at what we could do if we had the rest of the tools with us. Using the K tool, we're going to place this over the lock cylinder, but you'll see that we're going to run up against the doorknob. So we said earlier, try the doorknob first. Let's backtrack here. You can see why we're choosing the appropriate tools. Let's take the Halligan and remove that doorknob first, and it'll give a lot of space for us to get to the lock cylinder. And this is a force. Once it's off, you can manage the inside cylinder, or the inside bolt, if you will, by using one of the key tool parts. Now that it's out of the way, let's use the K tool and place the cutting jaw so that it goes behind the bolt. You want it to be tight to the wood door and being able to drive it down between the wood and the cylinder. Again, we tap it down a bit with the axe. There we go. Now, recognize that this particular lock cylinder is a commercial grade, and it has a tremendous amount of strength in it. We can operate simply now by taking one of the many parts of the key tool, which comes with your K tool, and in fact, reaching in and opening or rotating the bolt. And the door opens inward. Now let's take a look at that one more time. Remember, we take this, we have a full bolt. If you had tried to slide the two jambs apart, you would have had to clear by 1.5 to 2 inches. This way, we've taken off the locking mechanism and we've rotated the bolt out of the way, and in fact, been opening the door with less damage. Now, this is only part of your job. Once you've made entry, you need to consider the control of these doors. And we can do that with several items. We have many homemade door stops, one of which could hang on a hinge, as in angle iron. Hook it over your hinge. We could in fact carry blocks of wood and shove them between the jamb and the door, effectively holding it open. But something simpler and easier to carry would be many tenpenny nails. Simple nail, place the point of it in a screw and let it set itself against the jamb. You can open many doors and hold a lot of doors with just that simple nail. And now the door is controlled and we're ready to go on to a search and rescue operation, or more importantly, we can ventilate and some of the other things we need to accomplish. All the doors that open inward will operate as such. They'll be hard to force. The jambs will not come apart easily. You may have to try many different options to get through it. Let's take a look at an outward opening door now and see how the tools that we have just showed will be used on that. And we'll do it in a little more real-time evolution. Remember, we only have 5 minutes before we go on to a different type of opening. Now let's demonstrate opening with our tools an outward swinging door. We'll start with the fork end of the Halligan, place it in the crack between the door and the jamb, tap it 3-4 times to keep the jamb, go ahead, keep it going in, keep going. Okay, as it gets past the jamb, you force the Halligan bar over and the door opens as such. Now the same evolution can be done alternately with the adze end of the Halligan. You place it against the door. This time have the handle of the Halligan in line with the door. Hit it 2 or 3 times with the axe. And rotate the bar to open the door. Okay. Now if this isn't successful, of course, we can go back to working with through the lock. Now through the lock, remember, we needed to use that K tool. We place it on the lock cylinder. In this instance, we won't remove the knob. Halligan is placed in the yoke of the tool. And the axe drives it down. Once it's out of the way, of course, you walk in with your key tool and operate the lock mechanism as it was designed to be opened. You can see that the bolt is moving freely in there, and you can pull the door forward. Very limited damage to that piece of the door. Okay, now, since this was an outward opening door, we did have some hinges on it that we could address by actually pulling the pins. If it was a commercial door, however, these pins may in fact be welded at the bottom, so you could drive them up, but it would take a lot of force. Remember, we're talking strip malls and some other hotels and etc. So in place of doing this tool and using a lot of force to drive it, why don't we use that circular saw we had? We could actually lay it into the bolt pattern in between the jamb and and cut the deadbolt itself, especially if it was a hotel, or in fact on a commercial outside door, why not just take off the hinges? There's several different options here. You'll just have to choose which one works the best. This tool should have come with your firefighters.
We're going to go to New York City. Mickey Comboy, a firefighter with Rescue 3, runs in New York City, is going to take us through some advanced forcible entry techniques.
Now let's demonstrate which methods work best for the 12 types of locks commonly found on security gates today. With the standard type padlock, we can use the duckbill, or rather the bolt Bam Bam tool. If it's available, the shield is unshielded. If not, we can take the Halligan tool and use any of the 3 ends by inserting the pike end into the shackle, placing the adze on the body of the lock, or placing the fork across the body of the lock and striking the Halligan tool with the 8-pound flathead axe, or preferably the 10-pound maul for the added force. We will now have Danny and Bobby demonstrate inserting the pike end into the lock. As you can see, a few good blows and the lock is free. A point to remember is watch for that flying lock body. If it hits you in the toe, it's enough to keep you hopping. The next method of attack discuss today is twisting the shackle on a case-hardened padlock. The point to remember is, if the shackle is case-hardened, it has very little shear strength, which enables us to twist this and snap the shackle free. We can place the fork across both sides of the shackle, as shown, and we can also use the pipe wrench for this same method. Fireman Dan will demonstrate using the Halligan now. You can see great force is needed to twist this out. Sometimes instead of the shackle twisting, if the mount is not secure, as you can see here, the lock clip will break free from the channel rail and it will twist out. Either way, you can see your final goal is reached of gaining entry. The next method of forcing entry that we will discuss is cutting the shackle with the power saw or the torch. The point to remember with cutting these heavy-duty padlocks is both sides of the shackle have to be cut through because of the toe and heel locking feature. Bobby will come in and cut this shackle now using the power saw with the aluminum oxide blade. The point to remember is you can steady this with another tool such as a Halligan or a vice grip. If not, just pin the padlock against the channel rail as Bobby has with the power saw and cut through. Another method of cutting the shackle on the American Series 2000 is by use of the oxyacetylene torch. Again, the point to remember is locate the keyway. Here is located on the side. Come up the body of the lock 2/3 of the way and cut horizontally by use of the torch. We'll have Dan McDonough come in now and demonstrate cutting the torch. The point to remember when using the torch for cutting these locks, do not breathe the fumes coming off of this lock. The next lock we will demonstrate forcing entry through is a sliding shackle or horseshoe padlock. This type of lock is seeing increased use on gates today, similar to a horseshoe. Sometimes you will have the cylinder exposed where you can bam the cylinder out. But many times the cylinder is going to be shielded behind a case-hardened shield, eliminating the use of the bam. For our purposes today, we will demonstrate using a duckbill lock breaker to snap the shackle. The point to remember is where the shackle locks in the body. Locate the cylinder, or rather the shackle extending out of the side of the body, and you want to snap it, place the tool on the inside, whereas it locks on the inside here in the body. We'll have Dan and Bobby demonstrate using the duckbill lock breaker and a 10-pound maul for the added force. Remember, this shackle is going to be case hardened. As you can see, with a soft-bodied lock, such as brass here, it's going to separate. If it has a case-hardened shield, it will just make our job more difficult. Either way, we're through. The last method we'll demonstrate using is going to be using a power saw or the torch. We'll sever the shackle. Again, you want to cut on the inside of the shackle where it meets the body. We'll now demonstrate using the power saw to cut the case-hardened shackle on the inside where it meets the body of the lock. If you cut on the outside, this shackle is still going to stay in the lock, securing this to the gate. We'll now have Danny come in and demonstrate cutting the shackle on the inside with the power saw. We will conclude this this segment now on forcing entry into gates. Remember, now is the time to survey your area and pre-plan your attack into these security gates.
We've looked at some forcible entry techniques, we've looked at tools and different types of locks. Let's review a few of our major rules that we need to accomplish anytime we do forcible entry. We'll start by adding these to your performance checklist. Things like try the door before you actually force it. Deal with the door for heat, feeling it with the gloved hand or whatever method you choose. Wear protective clothing all the time. Imperative that you have a self-contained breathing apparatus on. It's not open the door until we have communication with the rest of the team, whether it's an attack team with hose, the incident command structure you're working under, or your own firefighters. Everybody needs to be ready before you force each door. How about choosing the correct tools? Each door, each lock that we've seen has a different need, a different type of tool works best on it. In some applications, nothing works best. You just have to be willing to adapt to that. One thing important, do not use your body to force a door. Don't kick the doors down. Those things don't work anymore. And most importantly, watch out for your fellow persons that are working with you. Tools can be dangerous. Watch out where those tools are being swung. Let's take a look at the performance checklist now. You have 3 sections we tried to cover. List the points of forcible entry size up. We know that we're going to do pre-fire planning. We're going to look at the building beforehand. We're going to look at the locks. You're going to take a look at the different types of tools that you own and how you would apply those to each of the situations that you could encounter. You're also going to look at the occupancies for time of day, which locks would be on and off at those times of days. Given some training and a chance to perform against some doors, maybe even in your own fire station or in a building that's being demolished, you have a chance to force those locks and get familiar with which way the doors open, which way the locks fall out, and which tool works the best for you. Continue to practice and work together as a team, and you have a forcible entry evolution that will be within the 5-minute parameters, and you will affect a safe entry.